So I want you to consider what sort of preparation you do pre-match, and I think every referee is very different. I know in the Premier League in Northern Ireland, some referees would do very minimal pre-match preparation because they're happy with that and they're quite happy approaching a game pretty much on match day. There's other referees, much like myself, that would do quite a lot of pre-match preparation in terms of looking at teams, looking at players. So realistically, again, as we said with a lot of the psychological and mental approaches, it's down to personal judgment, but it's about making sure you're happy going into a game with the amount of knowledge that you have. The internet, social media has given us a real opportunity there to prepare to the nth degree, really. You know, even at grassroots level, at supply league level, there would be lots of information about clubs, there'd be lots of videos. And I think the way I approach it is that I want to be going into a game with a very fresh mind, but with enough knowledge that I can go into a game and know some of the pitfalls that I may be coming up against. So one of the questions that coaches ask me a lot when I sort of do refereeing talks on the coaching badges would be, do referees prejudge players? Do referees have players' cards marked? And I think that's a personal question to ask, and I think it's a really difficult one because everybody knows that you have a club that maybe you've had bad experiences at. You have a player that you've had bad experiences of. You have a coach that you know as soon as you turn up, or you know that person's going to get on the back. And it's really, really difficult to approach with absolutely no preconceived idea. It's human nature that if you've had incidents, if you've had trauma in the past, you're going to react to that. So you somehow have to park that. And that comes back to leaving games behind, not going in thinking about the red card that I showed 6 weeks ago or the bad experience I had last season. I had a team in the northwest of England who every time I went there, something happened. And in my head, that became a cycle because I'm going in there and I have that heightened sense of stress when I'm driving to the ground because I was like, well, last time I was here, I had a mass confrontation and the manager was dismissed, and I'm automatically going in and not deliberately prejudging a situation. And I think it's about breaking that cycle. So doing something different, arriving to the ground slightly earlier and going for a walk and getting to your bearings. If you've had an individual that you've maybe had an issue with, speak to them. Approach them before a game and say, listen, just wanted to talk over, because that's you processing what happened and actually getting to a stage where you're more comfortable and breaking that cycle into place, because it's very difficult to break the cycle by simply having a good game because you're on tender hooks for that whole 90 minutes thinking, well, what's going to happen? In terms of prejudging players, we talk about identifying the problem player. And that's good, but I think identifying a problem player should be something that we're doing more on the day than before that. So a player may have a number of yellow cards, so you go down and say, oh, this player has 5 yellow cards, they're my problem player. That player might not be a problem player, they may just have picked up 5 yellow cards for tackles, it may be out of character. So you need to get some context around why that person's got 5 yellow cards, which obviously isn't available. So using stats is great, but I think they need to be used with a precursor of, do you know what, this may not be the norm. It's good to know, it's good to have that information, but I'm not prejudging a player. And exactly the same if you've had players who in the past that you've had issues with, whether that be discipline, whether that be dissent. I think it's good to go in with that fresh approach and actually thinking, well, do you know what, this player caused me a lot of problems last time. Did I cause the problems, or did the player cause the problems? Should I try a different approach? Should I try talking rather than going in with an early yellow card and changing that approach? And accepting sometimes it won't work. Sometimes there'll be players that we will always have problems with. But actually going in without those preconceived ideas and prejudgments. I know there was a player that I realised, having looked through my records, and I, again, like a lot of referees, I'd be a record keeper, I'd cautioned for the last 4 games. And it was like, well, do you know what? Why has this happened? You know, is this something, am I going in and prejudging the situation? When I look back, all the cautions were accepted cautions, were cautions that would have always have happened. And I remember speaking to the player and saying, let's try and not make it 5 in a row. And they were like, I genuinely didn't realise that you cautioned me all those times. I can never actually remember. So sometimes our own prejudgments are conscious in our minds, but not conscious in anybody else's. So that problem player isn't a problem player to you. So it's really, really important to get, again, it's what we've spoken about in other topics, making sure you're going into a game with everything that's gone on removed. So if you've had a bad experience, if you've sent a player off that was incorrect, making sure that you've processed information before you go into a game and nothing is lagging from the games that have gone by. So as much as doing some pre-match preparation is important, it's also important not to over-prepare for a game. I know referees that have prepared to the nth degree. They've watched clips, they've actually watched full matches. And I remember going into a European game. It was this early rounds of the Europa League, and the referee had really, really prepared, had watched the teams, had actually watched the teams where they played 12 months before, because they'd drawn themselves. This was the second time they'd drawn in the Europa League, and had a very, very detailed crib sheet of which players were important players to watch, formations. And then we arrived at the ground, and the team had been taken over by a new owner, had a completely new set of players. And all of a sudden, the referee has gone from being totally in the comfort zone to totally out of the comfort zone. And that's where relying on pre-match preparation can be dangerous, because if you're somebody that, we all have a bit of OCD about us, either whether that's because you put your socks in alphabetical order, or it's because you need to be organized. Everybody has that aspect. It's positive. It's a positive thing to have a little bit of OCD. I would be very much the same with my kit and things like that. But again, we have to be prepared to overcome that. We have to be prepared to be taken out of our comfort zone. So when you have 11 new players, you can do a little bit of research when you get there. But something could happen in the first 5 minutes that could totally change a game. There could be a red card, there could be a goal, and it can completely change it. So I think it's about being comfortable. I think it's about knowing the level of information you need, but being very, very readily accepting that things can change very quickly. You could come and 5 players could be injured, which could completely take it out. You could go and there's strong winds, so that can completely change the game. I think it's good to be prepared. I think it's good to know the situation you're getting into, but I think it's really, really positive to have that flexible approach and say things can change very, very quickly and I can adapt, and not relying on that pre-match preparation too much. So what things can you do for pre-match preparation? I think at all levels, we talk about social media and where social media can be positive. That's a good place to start. So many little bits of information you'll get from social media, such as, is a team struggling? Is a team on a bad run? Is a team really, really doing well? Who a top scorer is? There's lots of little bits of information you can find on Twitter, on Facebook, and things like that. League positions is really, really important. That's one of the things I really, really want to know. So if you've got a team bottom against a team top, that will give you a good feel of what the game is going to be like. 2 teams in the middle of the table, again, gives you a feel what it could be like. So I think league positions is so important. So if you have a top team against a bottom team, you're expecting a defensive performance from the bottom team. So you've got a team that scored 30 goals against a team that has conceded 30 goals. More than likely, you're going to get defensive. More than likely, a lot of the play is going to be one half. A lot of the time, there's going to be a lot of penalty area situations. I know in European games where you have some of the bigger nations against some of the sort of lower nations, often you'd find that there's a lot of penalty area incidents because the ball will be in the penalty area a lot more. Teams will be sitting deeper. Teams will be inviting pressure. That will affect your positioning. It will affect your approach to it. It will also, you're expecting counter-attacks. So you're expecting a lot of dynamic sprints. That's something you can prepare for as the week goes, particularly from a positional point of view. And equally, this doesn't always happen. So being open-minded enough to say that, well, do you know what, there could be an early goal from the side that are bottom. And actually that will probably increase that because, again, they will sort of get deeper. And I think also managing the game as well. If you know that a team has got to half-time at 45 minutes at 0-0, they'll probably come out quite intense. They'll want to hold that lead. And I think it's good to have that information so that you know the players' mindsets. You have your own mindset in there as well. And you can sort of prepare for that game going forward. Clips of games. So again, if you're watching a clip, again, I think it's key not to over-prepare, but if you watch some highlights of a game, 5 minutes highlights of a game, and you see that they've got a big number 9 up front and the ball goes long, that will give you information. There's a team in Northern Ireland called Crusaders who have a very, very set style of play. They have always had, for 10 years, they've had a style of play where they will aim the ball very much direct from full back to front man, who will then operate with 2 very, very quick players either side. For positioning, that's vital, because if I'm trying to chase that ball for 90 minutes, it's not going to happen. So I know with Crusaders, my positioning with Crusaders is slightly different when they're attacking, because I need to be reading the game a lot better. I need to be up with that front man where the ball is likely to go, much like teams would bear. But I think it's important to know at all levels, teams prepare for referees as well. I know I've spoken to coaches and they will turn around and say, well, I know if this person's refereeing, this is the level of discipline that I expect, this is the level. 100% every team in the elite level in Northern Ireland prepare for the referees. I've asked coaches that quite openly, and I think it's the same. So we need to be doing that little bit of prep. I think it's professional. It starts a good process for us. It's good practice. And there's so many different ways that we can do that. I think pre-match preparation also comes into your routine as well, which we've spoken about, and making sure you have that positive routine. Simple things as knowing where you go into a ground. There is nothing more stressful. I remember a long time ago when I was operating in, I think it was the Southern League, and my assistant for the day had put into the sat-nav the postcode on the confirmation letter, and he realised that was actually the address of the secretary and not the address of the ground. And we found the secretary, and we were about 20 minutes away from the ground. There's nothing more stressful than that to have an impact on your pre-match routine. So little things like that can be really, really important for making sure the day goes well.